Yeah, people are starting to talk about the history of Haiti. And so we always talk about the changes that are happening in the world, right? That we say that there is a renaissance of awakening happening, and it is happening here in the West. And it happens in the West for a reason, because of the freedom and the society and part of the plan of openness and culture, and so many people from so many nations and so many tongues being able to speak and have freedoms and liberties in what we would call the modern West. But we'll go through a lot of the history and other stuff of the whole big plan in other sessions today. We're just wondering about Haiti, this strange island country where slaves in our story got taken from Africa. And Africa is going to turn out to be a very important country as the progression of this world comes forward and people are starting to realize the importance of Africa. But slaves who came over here and were taken their freedom, their rights, their civil liberties, the pursuit of happiness, life, liberty, these inalienable rights endowed by God or endued by God upon all living souls, regardless of skin color. Haiti, what a political turmoil, what a political situation, where they try to free themselves and become free and try to express themselves, and then the powers that be in the Western Hemisphere somehow didn't support this freedom and democracy by a totally black civilization who had freed themselves from bondage, gotten out of the bondage that had enslaved them by the pharaohs of their time. It's strange when you think about it, and depending on how you word it, it's a really funky story. And so we're seeing ourselves in the world, and people are talking about these changes in the world and spiritual things happening and awakenings, and then all of a sudden calamities and earth and destruction and earthquakes and typhoons and El Nino. Man, this is weird, wild stuff we're living in, man. I can't believe this is so crazy and weird. And we're hearing some crazy conspiracies about Haiti and some strange concepts. But yeah, we're keeping the conversation casual. So let's talk about heroes, right? Let's talk about heroes, right? We talked a little bit about Haiti. We'll come back to a little bit later. Let's talk about heroes. Well, heroes, man, a lot of people watch TV, and I always talk about some of the strange pop culture stuff. Heroes is a really cool show. Now, Heroes is a show that deals with this concept of a world that is in a kind of an awakening state. We know that those of you who are fans of the show, it started with a strange phenomena where there was this concept that we're coming to a cataclysm, a judgment day event. And if you figured out the plan, if you figured out what was going on, if you saved the cheerleader, you could save the world. And different characters started to pop up, and each of them uniquely, depending on their line and who they were, and we started to learn different things, that they had different abilities and different powers. And it related to their story and who their relationships were and how their characters developed. And we started to learn as things progressed that a lot of these things were connected spiritually to their parents, their mothers and fathers, and a lot of the kids sometimes grow up not knowing the history of their forefathers, not knowing what happened in the past, even though they think that they see the world around them. And so we have these heroes and we have villains. Now, strangely, in this strange sci-fi show that's a phenomenal hit, some of the people start to develop patterns and abilities and senses and supernatural gifts. But they don't turn to the light. They turn to the dark, and they start using their powers for dark. Siler, the master of time. The master of time. One of the darkest of souls. Steals people's powers by drawing them and sucking them out of the brain. By actually diagnosing them and autopsying them on the spot. And pulling out their superpowers. Crazy show. You guys don't watch Heroes? It's weird, wild stuff. Well, for a lot of you who watch the show, there's all these different heroes and there's all these different villains. And in the beginning of the show, they started to figure out their superpowers and started to see the different patternings of events and started to see how they could come together. And the journey's been a little wild and weird. And a lot of the heroes that started to get obsessed with their own abilities and think that it was their job to save the world then begin to realize that there are many different patterns playing out and many different scenarios. And of course, we all have a role to play, but it is not always your destined, supernatural, fated position to control the destiny of every soul on the earth, right? Yes, you learn the importance of yourself while also keeping balance. And we see, for example, Peter and Mohinder and a lot of the different characters, if you love the show, go through these journeys. We see the Petrelli brothers, both Peter and Nathan, go through their different routes politically. Some of them get involved. Some of them get involved in helping other individuals. Some of them get involved in large-scale events. Some of them get involved in small-scale things. And they all have their unique abilities and gifts. Some of them hide their abilities. Some of them make their abilities open. And no matter what seems to happen, the plan continues to go along, and each of the characters develops in their story and learns more about themselves and more about the world around them, and is closely drawing themselves together and building a strange kind of bond. Now, a lot of the shows, just like any stories, it has ups and downs, and some episodes are really amazing and some episodes are slow, and so we have these ebbs and flows in time. Now, one of the interesting things, since we talk about some of the spiritual concepts, is this concept in Heroes that is so aligned with our understanding. Well, we said we're not going to talk a lot about the ascension or some of the spiritual concepts. We're going to keep it really casual. But we've talked about some of these issues of importance, like the spiritual understanding that even their powers, sometimes they go up, sometimes they go down. The powers and the light ebb and flow in cycles, and there are ramifications based on your choices, and there are ramifications based on other individuals that you interact with, and there's ramifications just on the patterning of the perfection of what's going on around them. One of the most interesting things we learn in Heroes is this strange pattern. Now, for some of you who pay attention to pop culture, you know that there's spiritual ramifications to things, especially in the sci-fi world, that this idea of the sun and the moon changing the forces of the world, right? We're talking from a pop culture world. Certain things happen to the moon. The winds begin to howl, right? Sometimes in those moon-filled nights, there's these casual things, that things go crazy. Well, even in a normal world, in the legal world, in the healthcare world, in the cop world, in the police and law enforcement world, they'll tell you, man, on those new full moon nights, woo, the moon, they bark at the moon and things go crazy. Women deliver, the gravity of the earth, the gravitational density, higher pregnancy rates, higher violence rates, higher strange cases, deaths. There's strange things that are related to magnetic forces. We all know that if we love our pop culture, right? We love our sci-fi, we watch our heroes. But there's also strange things that happen when dealing with the sun. Solar flares, radiation, magnetic forces, gamma rays, people's powers just pumping up, and all of a sudden, good and bad changing. And so Heroes gets into some of these interesting concepts, and they bring it right into center. There's these strange phenomena that happen throughout the story, both now and in the past, and even in the future. Heroes, like any good pop culture story, sci-fi, we go to the past, we go to the future. And so we do see different characters, especially one of the greatest characters, one of the masters of light, one of the characters, Hiro Nakamura, who is the master of space and time. Yatta! Right? We see him, even in the story of Heroes, gain the spiritual light from his mother and take the responsibility of being the destined holder of the flame. And we see Heroes specifically go through losing love and life and the journeys of understanding a son and his father and gaining the sword and the shield of his family, and some deep, deep spiritual meanings that we've talked about. Some cool stuff. But Hiro was there when we go into the past, when we see this key connection. That just as we said that all of us are looking for these spiritual moments, that there are these activation points. And just as the story goes on, when you have an eclipse of the sun and the moon,